Okay, hello to everybody that is on the webinar so far. We were going to give it just a couple more minutes to see who else attends, and then we will start our webinar. Hopefully you can all see my screen and you can hear us. Now's your chance to say if you can't. Just another thing to note, if you press the question mark button in your toolbox, it opens a questions pane and you can ask us any questions in there. So we'll wait a couple of minutes. Okay, welcome everybody. I think we'll make a start now. So welcome to our webinar, What It Means to Write for Pleasure. So we've got Ross Young and Felicity Ferguson sitting right beside me here. We're based in the UK in the Oxford office, but welcome to everybody else. I can see that you're all completely global, which is wonderful. Just to say this session is an hour and a half, so we'll have an hour of hearing Ross and Phil talk, and then we'll have half an hour at the end for any questions. If you have any questions as we go through, you can just click on the question mark in your toolbox and ask any questions there, and we'll do our very best to answer your questions at the end. This session is being recorded, so if for any you need to run off, well, not that we want to lose any of you, but if you do, then it will be recorded and it'll be put up on our website after this, so you won't lose anything. So I'm going to hand over to Ross and Felicity now and welcome them. Hopefully we'll be able to go from there.
Lovely. Thank you, Sarah. Very excited to be here talking to you all. If it's this morning or lunchtime, afternoon, wherever you are. I'm Ross Young and my colleague
is Felicity Ferguson, or Phil, which she prefers.
We've been teachers for over 50 years, haven't we?
Between us.
We're also national committee members for the United Kingdom Literacy Association, and we're also their national writing representatives. We're academic researchers, and that's what we're going to talk to you a little bit about today, our research project. What is it Writing for Pleasure teachers do that makes the difference? Also authors, as you've heard, we're the authors of Power English Writing. We've also got a couple of titles that are in press, which is Real World Writing, a handbook for teaching writing for 7 to 11-year-olds, and Writing for Pleasure from Theory to Practice, and those books will come out next year. And lastly, we're the founders, and this is what we're probably most excited about, we're the founders of the Writing for Pleasure Centre, which is an online portal, website, where you can find out all about research and effective practice in the teaching of writing. And that's writingforpleasure.com. And the idea is that teachers can upload examples of effective writing practice and teachers start to teach teachers. We also provide in-house school residencies where Phil and I will pitch ourselves, camp out in a school for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and help schools develop their writing teaching. We do that both at home or abroad. And lastly, we do put on CPD institutes and multi-day workshops, again, both at home and abroad. If you want to contact us at the end, we'll give our email and our Twitter at the end. And please do feel free to contact us. We're very friendly. But right now we're going to talk about our journey, because we didn't start out teaching writing effectively at all. We were pretty appalling at it, actually. And each of these pictures is going to represent a step on our journey. I'm going to start with the first one, this sort of Victorian picture.
That's when I started teaching.
And we call this our presentational approach, because what we used to ask the children to do would give very small writing tasks, which would only take them one session, maybe 2 sessions. And these tasks would be set just so the children could show that they could apply a certain writing skill, and then we would evaluate it. And we'd also give out an awful lot of sort of grammar worksheets, grammar exercises, in the thinking that that was good practice and that was what was going to get us the academic results. It didn't. It was incredibly boring to teach. We hated it. The children hated it. And it didn't bring us the results anyway. So we decided that we needed to try another approach, and we went on some very famous training at the time. And we, in the UK, with a gentleman that taught us about the sort of genre approach to teaching, which is this little chap here with his book with all the different genres around his head. Went on the training, we thought, yeah, this is it. This is the answer. We started to apply it. This was where we got children to sort of learn a piece of text off by heart, and then we'd ask them to sort of change bits and bobs of it, and we'd all go along at the same time. Everyone stayed in the lesson. We all produced this piece of text in chunks. No one was allowed to sort of go off on their own. And it was okay, but it was slow.
And the worst thing about it was really that the children who were very competent writers and had lots of ideas wanted to rush ahead, but we couldn't let them. So we were all working at the same pace, and they got very frustrated. So did we, to some extent.
We also had the problem that children's finished writing never went anywhere, never got published. It was never for any reason, again, other than that we were going to evaluate it at the end and just make sure that they'd put all the correct things in the right places, really. So the children got bored and we got bored. So that didn't work. So we tried another one. We tried what's quite popular in the UK at the moment, the literature approach. And this is the idea that, you know, you teach via a book. I remember we did a unit on Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, and I would sit the children down, would read a chapter, and then the children would go to their desks and we would give them a writing task to do. I don't know,
It's the ingredients for the Mad Hatter's Tea Party or something like that.
Yeah, or an invite to the Mad Hatter's Tea Party, something like that. And it certainly didn't bring us the academic results, because the problem with this approach was we were spending far too much teaching the reading and teaching the book at the expense of actually teaching the craft of writing. And again, the children were doing these tasks for no real reason. They just sort of popped up. We did them in a couple of days. We evaluated them, then we moved on. Didn't work. Around that time, National Literacy Trust brought out a very interesting survey which showed that for a number of years there was severe underachievement in children's writing. And I think what was even more worrying for Phil and I was that about 50% either disliked writing or were indifferent about writing. The results of the research also showed that if children can enjoy writing, that they're 8 times more likely to write above the expected standard. Children that dislike writing, for which we had many, they were 7 times more likely to write below the expected standard. After reading this research, we moved on to research into writing a little bit more, and we came across this, what we've called now the self-expression approach to writing, or the naturalistic, sometimes it's called. And this was about allowing children to come into school every day, sit down, do a little bit of writing. It was all very laissez-faire, very woolly, very relaxed. There wasn't much actual teaching going on. And the children were free to write every day. And Phil and I would go around and talk to them about their writing a little bit. And we saw some positive signs. Children all of a sudden were enjoying writing a hell of a lot more. But we weren't getting the academic progress this time. So it still wasn't working. And this is when we had a sort of eureka moment where we decided, well, why don't we take the best of that naturalistic self-expression approach and combine it with the genre approach? And we created what was called the community approach. And this is the idea that as a whole class, we're going to investigate, we're going to have a whole class writing project. We're going to learn about a genre, and then we're going to invite the children to use that genre for their own purposes and choose their own topics that they wanted to use. And that writing would always get published out. And it was becoming really successful. And we started writing about it, and then other people started to apply it in the UK. And we thought, well, once and for all, why don't we sit down, read pretty much all the writing research that's out there and find out what is effective practice. And that's what we did. And we've ended up calling it our writing for pleasure approach. And what was so interesting was I was reading research from the 1960s all the way up to the present day, and I'm still am. You know, there's research coming out in 2019, and what was fascinating was, regardless of time or place as well. I mean, there was research projects coming out of Canada, the US, the UK, Turkey, Australia, New Zealand. They were saying the same things. They were saying what we've now termed as these key principles of practice. And they were just coming up time and time again. And they're on the screen now. I'm just going to talk you through them briefly. So the first thing that effective teachers of writers do is they create a genuine community of writers. So their classroom becomes a place where children enter it every day, knowing that they're going to get on with a piece of writing that's genuine and it's for an audience. It's a very positive environment. It's about learning how to write through repeated practice. And it's a very social place where children are writing alongside each other and with each other. Another thing that was interesting was that the most effective teachers of writing will not siphon off, they will not remove their less experienced writers from the community. So everyone takes part. Children that are maybe less experienced or got special educational needs and disabilities, they were still part of the writing projects and the community of writers. They weren't doing worksheets. And the third one was the one that when we conducted our own research, which we'll talk about in a moment, was the one that the teachers that we observed were doing across the board and to a high level. And that was allowing children to read and share and talk about writing. Their classrooms were very social places. Children throughout the writing process were constantly rereading, talking about their writing with each other, evaluating their writing, helping each other compose their writing. And this all happens in what we call purposeful and authentic writing projects. So what the most efficient teachers of writing will do is they'll ensure that at the end of a writing project, the children are going to publish their pieces out to a real audience. And the children know that from the beginning. And that's made it's very high priority. It'll be up on display. The children know where this writing is going.
And it's also purposeful in the sense that it could be, the purpose could be to entertain, it could be to inform, it could be to tell a story, it could be all sorts of things, to persuade. But they were genuine purposes. They were not in any sense manufactured purposes.
Yeah, and the audiences there was a variety of audiences. So the children would be writing for younger children, children of their own age, parents, and the outside community. The most effective teachers of writing also set writing goals, and they set 3 different types of writing goals. They set distant goals, product goals, and process goals. Now, the distant goals we've talked about was knowing where this writing is going to end up at the end of the project. Then there was product goals. Now, product goals were set by looking at a whole range of exemplars. So they would look at lots of examples of what they're about to do themselves for themselves. So let's say we're going to write an anthology. All 30 of us are going to write some short stories to put in the school library. What these teachers would do is then look at a whole host of short stories, and the children would discuss, well, what are these writers doing that makes these stories so fantastic? And let's write this all up, and these will be our product goals, because this is what we want our short stories to do too. Slightly different to what people call success criteria, in that the children would also include things that weren't just, grammar, linguistic features, but also things they were going to do to make sure that they were attending to their audience. So if you're writing maybe for the younger children, it might be that you focus on mentioning characters and things that those younger children are going to identify with, and things like that. Lastly, they would set process goals, and these are like deadlines, because writers have to write to deadlines. We have to write to deadlines, that's for sure. And the teacher would tell the children what the ultimate deadline was. So, for example, in 3 weeks today, we need to make sure that our writing is ready. It's all been proofread, and it's ready for us to publish in 3 weeks' time. So that would be the big deadline. But it'd also set little mini deadlines. So they would say, look, by the end of the week or in the next 3 writing sessions, you've got to make sure that your draft is finished. Or you've got 2 more sessions before we need to get onto proofreading, things like that. And that is really, really effective.
And that actually allows children to work at their own pace to some extent, because we're not saying that everybody has to finish their draft today. You've got 2 days to do it. If you finish your draft before the 2 days are up, you can go on to something else. So there was some freedom there.
It's a common question we get, that, well, what do I do if a child in my class has finished their draft early? Oh, they panic. What do I do? And actually, if you've set up, writing journals, the children can actually carry on. We're going to talk about that in a moment. That's number 8, that they can carry on with their personal writing projects. So they're always in the constant state of writing and composition. Number 7, particularly in our research, we noticed that without fail, these teachers had a very consistent approach to how they planned their writing lessons. It was mini lesson. A mini lesson lasted 10 to 15 minutes. Then there was writing time, which was 30 minutes, 45 minutes. And then there would be class sharing at the end, and that would be anywhere between 10 minutes and 20 minutes. And that was every day. And the children got used to that routine. Personal writing projects was also very important. So the children had access to a journal that could go to and from school, and they would investigate their own little writing ideas, and they would see those through to publication. And there's 2 ways that teachers would do this. They would either have a set period every week, which would be personal writing project time, and also allow children to do it in little pockets of time, or they would have blocked time. And what we found is the most effective way of doing this is actually to make sure that each academic year you have 3 blocks in your timetable, which are 3 weeks long, and you call those your personal writing project weeks. Very, very important, very useful, particularly if you're looking for children to produce genuine independent writing as well, because they're having to take a germ of an idea all the way through to publication on their own. I think, Phil, you're going to talk a little bit about that later.
Is this? Oh, later. Yeah. Okay.
Now I'm going to put number 9 and 10 together because they're actually quite interconnected, but I want to talk a little bit more about how these mini lessons worked with the most effective writing teachers. they would always teach a lesson, these teachers, that they would then be able to say at the end of it, I want you to try this out in today's writing time. And if they were at the beginning of a project, they would make sure that those mini lessons were more to do with composition. Okay, so let's say, for example, they might give a mini lesson on how to open a story. And then later on in the project, the mini lessons would shift and they would become more transcriptional mini lessons. So they would share strategies for proofreading. And in Power English Writing, we give a really good acronym called CUPS, and you can teach children to use CUPS when they're proofreading. And it means they read for their piece 4 times. First time they read it just to sort out the capitalization. They'll read it again, maybe the following day, and check their use of vocabulary. Then they'll do punctuation, and then finally they'll check their spellings, things like that. Next, they were writer teachers. The reason they were writer teachers was when they gave these mini lessons, when they gave their direct instruction, they were able to talk from direct experience. And what we noticed were children were far more willing to listen. Their ears pricked up when they were being taught by a writer teacher because they felt they were getting genuine advice, as opposed to just their teacher droning on at the front of the class, not really listening. But it also helped them with number 12, which is pupil conferencing. The most effective teachers of writing don't typically use written feedback to any sort of great degree, or they're certainly not writing reams and reams. Instead, they would use verbal feedback, and they would make sure that they were giving it live while the child was still in the act of writing. The reason for this was that they could give their advice, and they knew that when they walked away from that conversation, that the child would be able to apply something to their writing, and therefore their writing would move forward and improve. And lastly, they really made sure they gave high priority to their teaching of reading. And they made sure that they made lots of connections between what writers do when they're reading and making sure that children had ample time to read. And they taught through what's called a reading for pleasure pedagogy. High quality libraries full of all sorts of texts, short stories, chapter books, newspapers, magazines, poetry, and the children's own published texts. And they also made sure that they read aloud to their classes every day. And lastly, you can't just focus on one of these principles and hope that your writing teaching is going to transform. You can't just introduce personal writing projects and your kids' writing is just going to explode and become absolutely brilliant. These all need to be used and applied in rich interconnection.
And they all take place within this really important number 1, which is creating a community of writers where children feel really at home. They feel like they are valued. They feel like they're a member of a sort of club. They don't mind sharing their writing. It all happens within this important community. So that has to be created for it to work.
Okay, we're going to move on to talk about our own research now, because we picked up on some sort of extra stuff that we noticed that the most effective teachers of writing do. And to give you a little bit background about our research is we went and observed the 6 teachers of writing that had a track record of getting really high levels of progress from their cohorts, from their classes. But also their children were showing high levels of enjoyment and pleasure in writing as well. And these teachers had to be able to prove that they had both of those things. And what our research showed when we were observing these teachers, that they were making sure that they attended to these sort of behaviours, these dispositions, these feelings. And there's 6 of them. The first one was self-efficacy. And this was the idea that their children really did believe that they were going to be successful and that their writing was going to succeed. Really positive, these teachers, made their kids feel great. They also made sure that children were realizing that they were going to apply lots of stuff that they'd learned in the past, and they would be able to use this stuff that they'd learned in the past in the current writing project. They also gave children huge levels of agency, and that means that the children were not only allowed to choose the topics that they wrote about, they were also able to choose their writing process. And in Power English Writing, we've actually got sort of names for the different types of writer, because not everyone writes the same way. So you might have some of your children in your class might be what we call sentence stackers. And these sorts of people, Phil is one, where they write a sentence, they'll revise that sentence, they'll proofread it before they move on to writing their next one. Well, I can't write like that. I'm not a sentence stacker one bit. I'm what we've called a discovery drafter. And this is where I just get it all down. It just comes out really, really quick. And then I discover what I want to write about, and then I mold it and I work on it after.
So you have the best of both worlds with the two of us. And that's why we are so successful as a collaborative partnership. Because one of us is really fast and the other one puts the brakes on and is really slow. And it ends up with something in the middle, which is very good.
I suppose the point is that not all children will be able to, there's not one agreed writing process, actually. Writers do not generate an idea, plan it, draft it, revise it, edit it. It doesn't work like that. They go up and down that scale all the time. And so children had agency over that. They could go up and down quite happily. The next, and when we interviewed the children, this was something that we were surprised, I suppose, at how important this was. To give them that confidence and for them to be able to use that agency, they needed to know what to do and how to do it. Sounds obvious. But without that, they felt so unsure. They felt so unsteady on their sort of writing feet. But what was interesting is the teachers used all three of those. So agency, having picked your own topic gave the children a huge sense of confidence because it was their topic. They knew an awful lot about it. And so you can see how that helped with their self-efficacy. Because they knew about this topic, they knew what they were going to write about and how they were going to organize it. So you can see how they link. This then helped with the motivation. They always knew why they were writing the thing they were writing, whether it was a class project or a personal project. They always knew where it was going when it was finished, when it was published. This then gave them that desire to write. They really wanted to write, and they would write at home just as much as they would write at school, and they would bring writing in from home and use it in school. And then in the end, that was what gave them true writer identities. And, they would look like that little bear that we've got on the screen. They really saw that they were writers right here, right now. They weren't going to be writers in the future. They were writers now.
And all these things, of course, are what goes to make up a successful writer. All of them have to be there.
And so effective practice actually involves these writing for pleasure behaviours and dispositions, and they're actually the same. You can't really teach, if you want to teach effectively, these things are going to happen on the other side. You are going to teach writing for pleasure. Okay, so the headlines from our research then were that the best teachers of writing had classes that also felt the most pleasure from writing. The most effective teachers, as we said, did attend to self-regulation, agency, and self-efficacy all together. And finally, that writing for pleasure is a very effective pedagogy. It gets you the results. Remember, these teachers had to prove they had to have a track record of very high levels of progress. And we believe it was because they were applying these 14 principles.
If you think back to the one that we called self-expression or naturalistic, the pleasure might have been there, but there was one huge thing missing, which was the instruction. So therefore, children might have been enjoying their writing, but it wasn't developing the way it should. And we feel that this community approach does take the best of both worlds. It takes the best of instruction and the best of pleasure, puts them together, and makes a very successful pedagogy.
So we'd like your help, because writing for pleasure is a fairly new pedagogy, and there's lots of myths going around, and people don't quite always understand it, and we've got these myths flying about. So you can help us by making sure that these myths don't sort of gather wings and start flying around. Now, writing for pleasure does not mean that you just allow children to free writing time. You know, just giving them agency doesn't work. As we said, they want to also know what to do and how to do it. They want high quality teaching from you, the teacher. They want you to give them direct instruction. There's this bizarre rumour that writing for pleasure teachers don't care about the quality of children's writing products. It couldn't be further from the truth, because this writing is being published, because it's being put out there in public, the children are very committed to making sure that their writing is the best that it can be. A separate project that we did ask children about proofreading in particular, and we found that children said, if I know that this writing is just going to stay in my book and it's just for my teacher, to be honest, I don't actually proofread very carefully, because I don't have to. I don't really care. It's not going to embarrass me. Whereas where the children knew it was going to be on public display and be used, all of a sudden their motivation went through the roof. And lastly, and this is the saddest one actually, is that because writing for pleasure teachers let children choose their topics, they're only going to ever write about sort of silly stuff or childlike stuff, trivial things. And that's not true, is it? I mean,
No.
I think when they're first given the opportunity to write on their own topics, they do, because to be perfectly honest, no one's given them a chance to write on their own topics since they were really little. When they're in nursery and preschool, children are allowed to write about whatever they like. And then we take that away from them. And when we give it back, they get sort of overexcited. But that soon dies down, doesn't it? And they become more discerning. And they think really carefully about their topics.
Yeah. And the worst scenario, of course, is perhaps children don't have anything to say. I mean, that seems to be a great fear, but it's absolutely untrue, because every child has got something to say. No child is a blank slate, so everybody has got something that they would like to share.
And I think we attended to that in Power English Writing, because we gave teachers hundreds of idea generation techniques and strategies, because that's what children want. They want to know what is it that these writers do to come up with these ideas, and you can actually teach that to children. Right. At this point, Phil and I have been to so many of these. You know, we go to webinars or CPD trainings and things, and it's like the person rabbits on and on, goes on and on and on. And you're never given any practical advice, never given anything you can actually do in your classroom. And we wanted to make sure we didn't do that. So now we're going to give you some takeaways, and these are things you can do in your classroom tomorrow, things you can do next week, next month, and maybe even put into your planning for next year. So we're going to start with what you could do tomorrow. Now this one you don't even have to do tomorrow, you could do this tonight. You can go on our website, writingforpleasure.com, and have a little look round. There's loads of resources, it's all free, help yourself. Okay, now tomorrow, what I'd love you to do is try out some pupil conferencing. Okay, so when the children are in writing time, just go around, sit next to a child and say, how's it going? And ask them a few questions about their writing, and you'll be amazed what you learn. Tomorrow, when it's your writing lesson, leave 10-15 minutes at the end and allow the children time just to talk about their writing with each other. Again, you'll be absolutely amazed. See what happens. Maybe later on in the week, try this out. While the children are writing, to say stop, reread what you've written out today, share it with a partner, get their opinion on it, and then allow them to carry on writing. This is a great one. You should be doing this all the time. Ask your children what they feel they need mini lessons on. Get a little pad of paper out. Ask them what they're struggling with. What do they find difficult when they are doing their writing? Because that's your planning. Done. That's your next week's planning. They've given you what they need lessons on. Next, now there's bound to be somewhere in your school, there's going to be a big pile of exercise books that are gathering dust. Give those out this week and call them their children's writing journals. These are their personal writing project books. And say to them, you can take these home, you can bring them back into school, you can write in them, you can do whatever you like in them. This week, I'd also like you just to try and do a little bit of writing for yourself. Get yourself your own little writing journal. Just do some little dabbling, some little doodles, what we call writing doodles. Maybe write a little poem here and there. Because the sooner you can become a writing teacher, the more quickly children are going to respond to you. And lastly, take some time out to read aloud to your class every day. Either read them a poem or read them your class read. You should have a chapter book that you're all reading together, because you'll be amazed that children suck all that up like a sponge, and a couple of weeks later, a few weeks down the line, all of a sudden it comes out in their writing. It's very spooky.
You can fit a little poem in quite often in the course of the day. I mean, just a few minutes before lunchtime or break, or just before they go home, read a poem.
Okay, what could you do next week? Okay, can't quite read my... Lovely, thank you. Yes, next week, when you're doing your planning, I just would love you to try and set out the routine of mini lesson writing time and class sharing, and just try that out for a week and see what happens, because I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. When you plan these mini lessons, you've got to make sure that whatever it is you're teaching, that by the end of it, you can turn around to your children and say, I want you to try that out now in today's writing. Okay? When you're doing your timetabling, when you're doing your planning next week, mark off 1 hour which you can make your personal writing time. Gives children 1 hour next week to do a little bit of writing that's personal to them. See what happens. Next week, gather them up on the carpet and share with them your writing journal, because they'll be absolutely fascinated to see how you do your writing. Talk about what you've been writing, how you've been writing it. They'll have loads of questions for you, and you'll gain their respect as a writer-teacher.
And you'll be sharing your own difficulties as well and your own problems. It's not as if everything you're going to show them that you've written is brilliant, because far from it. But they're going to get maximum benefit from seeing how you do things and what challenges you faced.
And they can often help you out of if you get into a writer's block,
Yeah.
Children are brilliant. They'll give you their opinion as well.
Yeah.
Next week, if you have sort of drop everything and read time, so if children are given independent reading time in your schools, just add on an extra 10 minutes at the end of that reading time and allow children to write after they've done their reading, because research has shown that this is very profitable in not only increasing children's reading comprehension, but it also raises their academic progress in writing as well. And a caveat to this is that also you can encourage children to, when they're reading, to collect words and phrases, even ideas or characters that they liked, and put them in their personal writing journals. And they should sort of store these good ideas up, because they might want to use them one day in their own writing. And after all, that's what real writers do. Right, bigger stuff now, what you could maybe do next month. What I'd love you to do is, when you do your next writing project, let the children know where it's going to be published. Make sure you're going to publish it out somewhere. and celebrate, have a publishing day as well. Because I think you'll be surprised at how the motivation will increase. Also, have a look at some exemplar text. So, for example, if you're going to do a magazine article, make sure that children can have a look at lots of magazine articles and have a chat about them, what made them really, really good, and write all that up. That's your product goals then. What did these writers do to make these pieces so successful and meaningful? Some teachers that we observed would even get the children to rank the articles that they were looking at from the best to the worst, and the children had to sort of explain why they were putting them in the order they were putting them in. That's also very good. Invite the children to generate their own ideas to use for the class writing project. Don't choose it for them on this occasion, and see what difference that makes.
And as we said before, there's a lot of help from that in Power English Writing.
Allow children to write at their own pace. Set the deadlines, give them soft little deadlines, but don't be too strict with it, and allow them to write at a way that's most comfortable for them, and just again see what happens. And lastly, give them lots of time to proofread and get these pieces reader ready. So the idea is that they get these products the best they can be before they're published. Now we're hoping that you'll get the bug, you'll get the writing bug, and you'll carry on writing in your journal. And once you become more experienced and you are writing more and more often, you'll start to notice that you have your own tricks and tips and things that you do that get you out of writer's block, or how you developed a character in a little short story you're writing, and then you can share that with your children during mini lessons. Also start to plan a bit more responsively. So teach mini lessons which respond to what you're noticing in pupil conferencing. If you're going round and you're having to answer the same old questions and you've got the same old writing problems going on in your class, that's your class telling you something. That's them saying, we really do need a mini lesson on this.
I remember there were an awful lot of children who were having problems with moving their writing on in terms of time. So they'd be describing one event, and then perhaps a couple of years needed to pass, and they wanted to describe the next event. They couldn't think how to do it. So that was an excellent mini lesson to be teaching at that time, because a lot of children are having trouble with that. And there are many, many mini lessons in Power Writing English. Of all sorts, attending to composition, linguistic ways of organising your text, and of course the transcription. So, there's so many valuable mini lessons in there.
Also really good ways of getting the grammar, because we know we've got to get the children to use the grammar in the curriculum. But I think what I'm pleased with our mini lessons is that it's always explaining why you would want to use that grammar in that piece of writing. And they're invaluable, really. You want this community of writers that you're building in your classroom. It has sort of two faces. So when the project starts, it's very sociable, it's very creative, it feels like a writer's workshop. Lots of people talking about their writing together. But as the project progresses and you get closer to the deadline and the publishing time, the focus shifts, and you want your children to be really professional and take it really seriously, and your classroom starts to turn into a publishing house, basically. And lastly, you spend 3 weeks, 4 weeks maybe, producing this piece of writing. Make sure you celebrate it. Make sure on the day it's published, you have a party. Have some drinks, some cocoa. Balloons. Maybe invite the parents in, invite the community in to celebrate what these children have achieved. Looking long term, we can't emphasize enough that you really want to make sure that you put 3 lots of personal writing project weeks into your academic year. 3 lots of 3 weeks where children come in every day and they just work on personal writing projects. Now, that doesn't mean that you stop using that consistent routine of mini lesson writing time and class sharing. You're still teaching even during those personal writing project weeks, but it's a really perfect time for children to show independently what they can do. And that's where you get your greater depth writers as well, which is a little bit a bonus.
Well, I feel that these personal writing projects are so valuable because actually they are the culmination, they are the final goal, they are the final aim of everything that we have been talking about today. Because what we want children to do is not do good writing in school only, but we want them to know that they can take what they've learned in school, outside school, and out into the world as adults. So personal writing projects, to my mind, have as much value as the class writing projects do. Teachers, writing for pleasure teachers will regard them as equally valuable as class writing projects. And we'll give them the same attention and the same kind of respect. And if we know that children are going to take their skills outside school and really apply them to their real lives, then I think the whole project has fulfilled its aim.
Ready for next year, what you want to be doing is collecting great examples of children's writing this year. Because there's nothing better than sharing with children writing that they know has been done by children of a similar age. They really respond to that. Another thing you can do, you have to be a little bit careful with this, is you can also collect examples that weren't so great, where children didn't really achieve what you were looking to achieve. Make sure you take their names off, but these are equally valuable because children learn lessons from their peers there. They can go, oh gosh, okay, I definitely am not going to do what that child did in that piece of writing. Really valuable, particularly with your less experienced writers, actually. That is particularly effective, showing them examples that weren't successful. Because they were probably planning to do exactly that.
Yeah.
Make sure you're sharing your own example text as well. The reason for this is that you can answer their questions. So you can talk about where you got the idea from. You can talk about the decisions you made, and then they can basically copy you, and they can learn from you as a real, genuine writer teacher. Next year, set up a teachers writing group. There's lots of information on how to set up your own writing groups in your school on our website. It's a whole pack on how to do it. So get on our website and set up it can be once a month, you meet after school and write together. It's lovely. Encourage children to write in response to their reading. So make sure that's embedded after reading time. That always leads into a little bit of writing time. You can also monitor children's feelings towards writing. We've got a questionnaire and interview on our website as well, which tells you how your children are feeling towards writing. So, we talked about those dispositions like self-efficacy, agency. You can see how well your children are feeling those dispositions. And if one of them's low, it gives you advice on how you can increase that. And lastly, sign up to our website, become a school affiliate. So by doing that, you can read other teachers' examples of practice. You can share your good examples of practice, and it becomes a real teacher network. So you're amongst friends. It's a whole group of us. We're all writer teachers together, and we're learning from each other, teacher to teacher.
I think that's about all we have to say, isn't it? Yeah.
Okay, lovely. Thank you so much. So like I said at the beginning, if you have any questions, we have, about 30 minutes for questions. So there is a little question box in your toolbar. If you just click on that, you can ask us some questions. We'll give you a couple of minutes. We've got a few questions already in here, which is great.
We love questions.
Yeah.
We're very friendly.
So we have a question from a MFL teacher. And would these strategies work to encourage students writing in another language? This would be aimed to enhance their writing skills and therefore improve their grades.
Yeah, if they are writing in another language,
Yeah.
then the same principles absolutely apply as if they were writing in English. If they can write in their own language, you're asking them to, you're actually lessening the cognitive load and the cognitive burden of writing in a, if you want them to write in English, you're lessening the cognitive load because they are going to be writing about something they know about. They don't have to think too much about whether they understand the topic for writing because it's their topic, and they can concentrate on how to express that either in their own language or in English. So yes, I would say absolutely it does apply to EFL learners.
I've got a question regarding the recording of this webinar. So this webinar is being recorded and we shared amongst everyone that's registered, so you'll get the link, but it'll also be on the Global Schools website probably by the end of this week. So we'll send you all an email once it's there. I teach at high school in Mexico. We don't have a full week to work with just one skill, just 2 hours a week. How can it adapt to my class?
I don't think, I think that's a serious question your school needs to ask, because we know that children need to write every day. Children need to write for between half an hour and 45 minutes. If you're not doing that, that's where you need to begin. That's the first thing your school needs to attend to. You need to make sure children are writing every day.
Okay, we've got another question about ELL students, but I think we've answered that one. How can this be adapted for classes with 100% ELL students? Some with no English. But I think it's just, you've answered that, haven't you? Would you pair good writers with the weaker ones?
Yes, so the academic research time and time again showed that children should be writing together. So your weaker or less experienced writers should be writing alongside more advanced writers, absolutely. And they genuinely learn from one another. Just because they're less experienced, they can still have a blooming good opinion on another child's piece. Absolutely.
Could this be the same or similar with college students, especially if some of them are apathetic?
Oh, apathetic, is it?
You mean like disaffected, not keen on it?
Yeah.
Is that what
Let's
it
go back
means?
to
Maybe
that
with
one.
higher level students, possibly. Do you think college students? If Claudia's listening to this, I'm just trying to.
I mean, yeah. I mean, we've known in the UK, children's attitudes towards writing gets worse as they get older. Yeah. So when I told you that 50% disliked writing, it only gets worse in the UK once they went into secondary school. So focusing on those behaviours that we talked about, the self-efficacy, the agency and the self-regulation, absolutely, your college students would be very grateful.
Yeah.
Should teachers focus on handwriting while encouraging them to be creative? Is it a realistic goal?
Not at the same time, I would say. I would go for the creative first of all. Handwriting, yeah, we've got an interesting view on handwriting, which is that a lot of schools will do handwriting practice as a separate session. But we would always prefer to ask children to attend to their handwriting just before they publish. And this gives handwriting a whole point, which it doesn't have if you're doing it separately. You are asking them to attend to their good handwriting so that they can present a very nice piece of published work that will be good to look at.
So we've got, unfortunately, nowadays students don't like writing. They usually write short messages.
Yep, and so the reason why they don't like writing and the reason they're writing as short as messages as possible is because they don't feel they're going to be successful. they're not writing on something that they're passionate about or they know a lot about. So they're not writing from a position of strength, and they don't know what to do and how to do it because they're not being given writing lessons which are about the craft of writing. And it's when those three things hit that you end up with students as you describe.
So every day, is it a primary strategy only?
So the research that I looked into went from kindergarten all the way up to middle school. So it can be done in Key Stage 1 and is certainly, I think, a lot of valuable principles in there for secondary.
Yeah, we do get some secondary teachers sort of recognising that really and asking us if we might do something for Key Stage 3 along the lines of what we've done for Key Stage 2. Similarly with Key Stage 1. So we're sort of very open to looking at both of those and think it would be applicable.
Similar to that is, how long should 7-year-olds write every day?
I think a 7-year-old, over time, if you are setting up this reassuringly consistent routine of mini lesson writing time, class sharing, in a couple of months, they can easily write for half an hour, 40 minutes, particularly if they write on something that they're motivated by. It's not a chore. They're enjoying themselves, particularly if they can also stop and talk about their writing. So it shouldn't just be silent writing.
Could it be done as a project per term? Could it be done a month prior to the end of the term so the children are already exposed to varied types of writing?
So a writing project should probably take about 3 weeks. If it's a poetry project, we think 2 weeks is about right.
Yeah.
These are brilliant questions.
Can showing an example of someone that made a free writing be beneficial to students, or will this stop their free writing thinking process?
We have a bit of a problem really with this terminology, the free writing, because people seem to understand different things by it. Free writing can mean just writing anything out of your head, let your pencil go across the paper for 5 minutes without stopping, which is one strategy for loosening up, getting going. I think also a lot of people think that free writing is what we were describing in the self-expression or the naturalistic approach, which is where you just let children loose and they write on their own, they write their own stuff. But free writing in our terms is personal project writing, which is treated in exactly the same way as the class writing project. So children will go through the processes, children will be conferenced, children will have a preceding mini lesson. And I hope I've answered your question because I've probably forgotten what it was.
It might be if this person's talking about the free writing technique, which was
Peter Elbow.
Peter Elbow introduced, where you quite literally write freely. You write whatever's on your mind for 10 minutes. If you're saying, look, showing children how you've done that yourself, you've written for 10 minutes, is that beneficial to children? I think absolutely. Absolutely, because you're showing them a strategy which they can then have a go at. They'll probably be quite pleased.
Yeah. You couldn't clarify what you mean, could you? By what's free writing to you?
Yep. Who Luciano?
Yeah.
If you want to clarify your question, we've also got another question from him who said, how much should I focus on mechanics when writing? How much should I focus on correcting other errors?
Brilliant. This is a great one. So at the beginning of the topic, the writing project, you're doing your pupil conferencing and you're going around and you're going to give advice on, funny enough, composition. Now, as we said, when your class makes that transition to becoming more like a publishing house and it all gets very serious, that's then when you can start talking about mechanics and you can talk about how you want these pieces to be as accurate as possible. And don't be afraid, talk to them and say, actually, this isn't correct. I would like you to correct it. Have very high standards for mechanics.
My school has high levels of EAL children. How would you support them with more independent personal writing projects? For example, writing at home in their writing journals.
I think you've answered your own question,
Yeah.
because home writing journals will be of huge benefit to EAL learners, because they can write in their home language, or they can write in English, and they'll often mix the two. And it's absolutely brilliant.
Answered some of these already. If students don't have a good level of English, even if proofreading their work, should I publish it?
Yes. Absolutely. Nothing better. There's no better feeling than publishing your work, and they'll feel great.
Okay, we've got, I teach in a British international school with students that come from all over the world and speak more than 60 languages between them. The English department and the ELL department are doing extremely well to promote reading and writing in English. My question is, what do you think common topics that would encourage writing and at the same time celebrate diversity in our school?
Well, in Power English Writing, one of my favourite projects to do is personal narrative, so memoir writing, so writing about your life. And we often talk about them being little diamond moments, so it doesn't have to be anything extreme or elaborate or amazing. It can just be something that they or their family do that's every day for them. And when they publish, the rest of their class get to read about them and their lives and their stories, and then children become a closer knit community, actually.
It can be ordinary events which have somehow struck them as being memorable or significant.
Best person to share is Michael Rosen's poems, because he writes loads of poems about just everyday things. He wrote a poem about changing a nappy, and brushing his teeth, and eating a bit of chocolate cake, and children pick up on that and they can do their own versions.
Some students love writing, but they do use text message language and need to be dissuaded. Would that discourage from writing?
So if you're doing your product goals, it depends on the audience, of course. So you can say, is your audience going to like text message language? Well, if they're writing for children their own age, I suspect they would quite like it. But other times you have to say, well, actually, that time you're not going to be able to use that language, because your reader ain't going to enjoy it, not going to want it.
Okay. Questions keep coming. It's great. You spoke earlier about idea generation strategies. Is there somewhere that I can access these?
There's hundreds of them in Power English Writing, but I'll give you two. I'll give you two for free. So one is, I can't take credit for this one, it's by a US educator called Georgia Hurd, and she calls it the Ideas Heart. Very simple. Get the children to draw a heart in their writing project book, and they fill it with anything that they love, anything that they're passionate about, anything to do with their lives. They write lots and lots of words inside it. So, for example, a child might write Manchester United. And then what you do, these are quite big topics. You then get them to investigate this topic and find little topics inside. So it might be that they start writing things down like Old Trafford and Eric Cantona, and the time the cat leapt up because we celebrated a goal, and scratched Dad. It'll be things like that. That's a good one. The other one I'll give you is one that Roald Dahl used when he wrote a very famous book. All he did is he wrote, what if, and he kept finishing that sentence off. What if I fell down a pothole? What if I could fly? And then he wrote, what if a madman was to run a chocolate factory? And of course, that gave him the idea for one of his most famous books. So there's two strategies for you.
Okay. So I don't think we've got any other questions, but while you're all thinking, so we've still got time, I will tell you all about Power English Writing. So it's just launched internationally on the website. So if you go to globalschools.com and type in the search bar Power English, you'll be able to find everything else about it, and you can sign up to a free 60-day trial so you can test it out for yourself, use it in your class, find out how great it is. And the other thing that we want to mention is our free international writing competition, which has just launched. And actually, Ross and Phil are part of the panelists. So if you would like more information, you can go to the Global Schools website and you can find out about the My Twist on a Tale, it's called. We're encouraging any young writers from 4 to 16 to basically tear out the rule book and take any classic story or traditional fairy tale and put their own modern twist on it. So it could be anything from their location or their heritage, their diversity, anything, and put their own spin on it. And the deadline for that is the 29th of November. And everything's on our website. Download the entry pack, it's got some great ideas. You can submit your entry there as well. And then I think Ross and Phil are just going to give us a quick what they're looking for in the winner.
Yeah, if you want your children to win, we'll give you a couple of tips. So what we're looking for is, I want your children to share a little bit about themselves and their lives. I think that's what I find the most engaging, particularly in children's writing. I love hearing about an aspect of their life, just a little tiny thing that they get up to. I love it. I'm nosy, you see.
And mine really is very much the same. I just like to hear a child's own voice coming through. And of course, you know, if they're writing about things that really interest them, then their voice will come through.
Yeah.
What I really like about this particular competition is we've got things called like a dribble, which means that your children can write a story with just 20 words. And that means that everyone can take part then. Anyone can write 20-word story. Then you've got a drabble, which is about 50 to 100 words. And they can write a flash fiction, which is around 350 words. So it's very inclusive, our competition. I'm really proud of that, actually.
Yeah, there you go. You could have some winning students there. We have just got a couple more questions come in. My students have difficulty starting their writing. They're unable to begin it. Sometimes I end up providing them with starters or beginnings, but I want them to be able to start independently to be better writers.
Yeah. We could talk about specifically about the opening mini lesson. Would that help?
Depends what genre, of course.
Yeah.
If they're I'm assuming they're talking about narrative.
I would imagine.
So we have a mini lesson on Power English Writing, but if you're quick, you can write this down and steal it. So there's lots of common openings to stories, basically. They either start with some dialogue. So up on your wall, just have loads of examples of how stories open with dialogue, speech. Sometimes they just go straight into the actions. Something happens immediately. Again, put it up on display. Sometimes stories start with a question. Okay.
It's me, sorry. Keep going.
Sometimes it's something shocking, sort of quick, sharp, unexpected. There is one more.
It's description.
Yes.
It's description, I think. Yeah, description of a place or even of a person. And I mean, just pick a couple of books out of your class library, and you could have a lovely time just sort of looking at the beginnings and read them out and let children read them out and see which ones you like.
Okay, and we've got time for one more question because I know this one came up this morning as well. What do you mean when you use the term publishing?
So publishing means it's their final copy, but it's more than that. It goes out to the audience. So it's actually put in the hands of the reader. So some examples may be to send something in the post. It may be that it goes on a blog or a website. It might be that they video themselves. It may be that they put on a performance and they do a poetry night. It may be that the stories all get put together and they go in another classroom's library. What it means is it's written up, it's done, and then it's out there for people to enjoy.
What it means is that it's something that is made public.
Okay, so we're going to end the session there. Thank you all so much for attending. I'm going to put this recording online and you'll receive an email by the end of the week with it. So do share with your colleagues, and just thank you so much for coming.
What I will say is if you want to get in touch, if you've got any questions, just email us. Our emails there, we're very friendly. literacyforpleasure@gmail.com, and we'll try and get back to you.
Lovely.
And thank you for listening to us.
Yeah. Okay. Have a great day or evening, wherever you are, and thanks for coming.